scienceandpublicpolicy.org. That's Lord Monckton's powerful website. Infowars.com and prisonplanet.com are our websites. We're here live Monday through Friday from 11 a.m. to 3 p.m. Central Standard Time. You can also listen to the podcast for free and the iPhone app at Infowars.com. Just download those whenever you'd like and listen how you want, where you want, when you want. Lord Monckton, I want to move quickly now through some of the points that we foreshadowed. But first off, I just want to commend you here on air because you are a testament of somebody for close to 2 decades who tirelessly recognized a threat before others, stood up against them, and went only on the facts and have, not single-handedly, but if you have to give the credit to one person, devastated this true threat to human civilization, exploration, society. And so from my family to yours, I commend you. So can you briefly speak about the satisfaction you must have for others out there so they can realize the satisfaction they can have by taking action against evil? I mean, it's got to be satisfying to go from a voice in the wilderness to seeing this massive turning of the tide, A, and then B, our work isn't done, though. How satisfying would it be to see the people promoting world government, and now they have to admit that they are trying to set this up, to see them fully routed and fully defeated? Please speak to that.
Yes, certainly. First of all, you're very kind, perhaps too kind. I'm one of the Johnny-come-latelys in this. I've only been really active in the last 3 or 4 years in trying to expose this because I came under unexpectedly savage attack 4 years ago when I first went public with a major article in a British Sunday newspaper, the Sunday Telegraph, and the international climate extremist left began a vicious series of attacks on me in newspapers, on the blogosphere, all over the place. And I thought this was very strange because all I'd done was a quiet, quite large article. It got a certain amount of prominence. The website of the newspaper actually crashed because 127,000 people tried to access it in 2 hours after it was published. So it was very popular. But even so, this very extreme reaction, I'd never seen this before. So I looked at the points of science on which they were trying to attack me, and wherever they were trying to attack me most viciously, they were trying to beat people away from understanding the points that I was making, and they were trying to confuse.
They were desperate. They wanted to set a precedent that anyone that spoke up would be torn apart. Anybody who was a professor would lose their tenure.
That's it.
But going back, sir, I mean, you're not kind to yourself. I've seen writings of you 20-plus years ago fighting the fake environmental movement, 20-plus years ago fighting the international communist movement. See, I see that as one contiguous system. Yes, you've been particularly vocal on the anthropogenic global warming fraud because it's come to the fore in the last 4 years. But correct me if I'm wrong, you've been battling this very same gaggle for decades.
Oh, certainly, yes. I mean, I've been battling against, for instance, the European dictatorship. We no longer have democracy in Europe now. I've been fighting that for 20 or 30 years. I've been fighting communism. I was one of those who played a small part in bringing the Berlin Wall down because I worked for Margaret Thatcher and I knew Ron Reagan as well. And, you know, we did that. And I was very honored to be a tiny, tiny cog in the great governmental machine of Margaret Thatcher for 4 years in number 10 Downing Street.
But it's got to be satisfying, though. I mean, it's got to be satisfying.
Well, satisfying is the wrong word. I think what is nice is how many kind people write to me out of the blue saying they've seen some vicious attack on me somewhere by the international climate extremist movement. And they say, you know, the fact that you're still here after all these attacks on you tells us you must be doing something right, and you mustn't think that these people represent how people generally think. And a lot of people are very, very kind in getting in touch. Just a short email here or there saying, you know, we are so grateful that you are standing up and speaking out because somebody's got to, and you're using your platform. Now, they're very sweet about it, and it makes a lot of difference, that, because it's actually quite hard being in the firing line all the time and having the most unspeakable things done by people who ought to know better in journalism, in academia, and elsewhere. And so I am very grateful to you and to others who do speak the occasional kind word, because it cheers me up no end.
But, again, it's not just about talking about Lord Monckton today. I'm just holding you up because you deserve it as somebody who has gone through the fire and come out better on the other side. I mean, this is a giant criminal, premeditated seizure of all of human society, and you are traveling. I mean, I'm pretty young, and I'm in good shape, and I get exhausted when I fly around a bunch of places. I mean, you have been to the four corners of the earth. I have watched your labors, and I have seen you devastate the enemy. And so I just can't help but at a very instinctive, primitive level, someone who's fighting against people who literally want to cut the resources off to my family and who I know are a bunch of eugenics, control freak, population reducers. All I can do is say, hail Lord Monckton. We appreciate you.
Well, bless you. That's very, very kind. I mean, that is the most satisfying part about it, that wherever I go, very large crowds turn up. I mean, I did a tour of Australia earlier this year, which played, I think, a small part in bringing Kevin Rudd down because he was so stupid. I did offer to go and see him and explain why the climate isn't in the trouble he thinks it is, but he wouldn't see me. But, I mean, huge audiences turned up everywhere, thousands at a time. And they came from out of the bush, they came from out of the towns and cities, they came from out of the mines, and they just came, and, the miners in particular in Newcastle, which is the mining district just north of Sydney, they came in huge numbers. We'd booked a medium-sized room in the town hall. We had to jack that in and go for the main town hall building. That wasn't big enough, so we took over the gallery, and there were still people in line outside when I started talking. Wonderful crowds.
Yeah, we found Australia is just on fire with liberty, really waking up. Canada, the U.S., England, Europe. This is so exciting. Now, in the time we've got left, finishing up that question I asked before the break, specifically, what is their international stratagem to deceptively try to, because we know these people never give up, to try to force through this global tax?
Well, what they're going to do is to continue to address the arguments from now on, more or less exclusively, to the governing class. The people who are doing this are no longer going to try to get the support of the public. They know that we have won the argument as far as the public are concerned. The general public no longer buys global warming, period. They've had enough of it. They don't want to be bored with it anymore. You'll see it less and less often now in even the most extreme left-wing media. They're just all realizing the public are simply tired of hearing people crying wolf. So they're now addressing themselves very quietly and very furtively and very invisibly to the governing class worldwide. I've just come back from Bonn, for instance, where there was yet another conference in preparation for the Cancun climate change treaty, which will be the next step in the road towards world government, unelected world government, of course. And it was quite clear that what was going on there, the UN's officials and the odd scientists murmuring into the ears of international delegates one by one to persuade them that this is all absolutely terrible. And of course, I was there too, murmuring into the other ear of the delegates. And interestingly, this time round, for instance, a delegate from a leading Southern African country, when I said to him, the trouble is, even if the UN's right on the science, economically, the stupidest possible way to do with this is interfering in the right of countries, particularly poor countries, to emit as much carbon dioxide by using fossil fuels as they need to lift their people out of poverty. He said, why have you chosen to speak to me? I said, well, I'm speaking to all sorts of delegates. You're just the next one on the list. He said, I've been saying exactly what you're saying. You're so right. The idea of trying to curb CO2, we all know, our own scientists tell us it makes no difference to the climate. He said the thing that makes a difference is to adapt to any climate change that might result, in whatever direction it might result, as and when we need to. He said that's going to be so much cheaper and more efficient. And, of course, that's the correct point.
Well, look at the sun right now.
Delegates are now saying that.
Well, look at the sun right now. First it heated up, now it's cooling off. Now NASA says they believe from their studies, of course they can't know 100%, that it's about to go wild. What does SUVs or a family having a high-calorie diet have to do with the sun?
Well, of course, nothing whatever. This is just more scare stories. It's very difficult to tell which way the sun's going to go next. We simply don't know enough about it, and to try to pretend otherwise is futile. It did go through a very quiet period for 3 years. Now it seems to be quite agitated again, but whether it stays agitated or not, or just collapses back into quietude in a few years' time, it's anybody's guess, frankly. Nobody is able to predict yet which way the sun is going to go. If you look at the forecasts from the leading solar physicists, they're all over the place. They don't disagree. They don't agree with one another. Yet again, there is no consensus, because there can't be, because our information on just about every aspect of the climate is so woefully incomplete.